how to overcome stress and emotional eating once and for all. All right. Let's first talk about why this matters. This is a weight loss graph from a client of ours who's working with us right now. Her name is Ashley. And Ashley is down 190 pounds and counting, which that number alone is kind of mind boggling. And it makes you immediately say, she's lost 190 pounds. What weight did she start at? Right. And so Ashley is someone who, if she were here, she would tell you losing weight has been something she has struggled with for most of her life. And because of that, stress and emotional eating has been a huge component of that for her in her life. And yet she's down 190 pounds and counting. And what I want you guys to understand is what I'm going to teach you guys in this training is largely what is responsible for Ashley being able to really experience this level of success. Ashley got onto a coaching call the other day in our program, and we were asking people to share wins. And the win that she shared was that for the first time in her journey and in her life, she now feels 100% confident that she will not regain the weight that she has lost. She'll never go back to where she started. And the confidence that she has to be able to say that, first of all, that's just massive. Okay. But the confidence that she has to be able to say that and to say that confidently comes from exactly what I'm going to show you guys in this training. It comes from the strategy and her actually putting that strategy and doing that work in her own life, to where, as you can see on this graph, she's run into many different struggles along the way on her weight loss journey, but none of them have prevented her from continuing to move forward. And that's where that confidence that she now has is coming from. So I wanted to start with this, just a very real and an extreme story to show you guys that this stuff really, really works. Okay. So what are we going to cover in this training? There's going to be 3 parts to this training. The first part, we're going to actually start with what is stress and emotional eating. Because before we can overcome the problem, we have to fully understand what is actually happening so that we can then know how to fix it in the first place. Okay, that's going to be part 1. Part 2 is I'm going to go over and walk you guys through the 2-pronged strategy that we use to overcome stress and emotional eating. So there are 2 different strategies that we use, and I'm going to walk you through both of those. One is more focused on immediate improvement, right? Getting you some success and some wins in the short term, and also making this whole fight feel much easier as you're going through it, buying you time to then do the longer term growth that you need to do as well. So 2-pronged strategy we're going to cover in part 2. And then in part 3, I'm actually going to dive into the actual tools and frameworks mentally, emotionally that we have found really, really work. These are the things that are going to ultimately grow you into the person who no longer mentally, emotionally struggles with stress and emotional eating to the degree that you do today. You're probably never ever going to get to a place where you never feel led to stress eat or emotionally eat. I still encounter that myself to this day. But with the tools that we're going to teach you and the frameworks we're going to give you, you can reach a point in your life where, though you may feel led to or drawn to want to stress or emotionally eat, it won't have the hold and the control and the power and the impact on you and your life that it does today. So those are the 3 parts of this training. And let's go ahead and dive in with part number 1. So we have to first understand what exactly is happening when we stress eat. Why do we do it? What causes us to do it? Why do we do it so much? All that stuff. So what I want to cover with you guys here is the stress eating cycle and exactly what's happening. Okay, so what you'll see here in the upper right-hand corner, step 1 is we get triggered by something. Okay, so some kind of a negative trigger happens. It could be something happening to you, something said to you, something happening around you, something happening to or around someone that you care about. And whatever that thing is, something that you perceive as negative or bad or whatever word you want to attach to it, something happens, okay? Then we start to process that thing. Okay, we start to think about the thing, the event, whatever that is, we start to process it in a particularly negative way. Okay, so we get triggered, we then start to think and our thoughts start to race and we start to negatively process this thing. And then it's that negative processing, the negative thought processes that we're engaging in that start to trigger stress hormone release inside our body. So we're thinking negatively, and that starts to shift hormones inside our body, and it causes our body to release hormones like cortisol, hormones like epinephrine, adrenaline at times. And those hormones start to literally make us feel certain physical sensations. Our heart rate increases, our breath becomes shallow, we start to feel and tense up in parts of our body. We might even start to shake. We might get headaches. We might get nauseous, feel like we want to throw up. We might start sweating. There are so many different things in sensations that we can start to experience, none of which feel comfortable or good. All right. So we get triggered. We start thinking and processing in a negative way. That processing drives literal stress hormone release in our body that causes physical sensations that make us very uncomfortable. And then what happens? We turn to something to change the way we feel. And for most people, it's food. And what do? We don't just turn to any food. We don't turn to chicken breast and broccoli. We turn to very indulgent tasting food that comes with a lot of pleasureful feeling when we eat it, right? And so what that does when we turn to a highly indulgent, pleasureful food is that then triggers a new hormone release, right? See, we were feeling tense and full of anxiety and all those uncomfortable feelings because we were processing this event in a very negative way. Then we eat the food, and now we have triggered with the food a new hormone release, which is usually the hormone dopamine, which is also known as the feel-good hormone. And now that feel-good hormone dumping into our body as we're eating this very indulgent tasting food is sort of washing away the other stress hormones. It's counteracting the stress hormones, and it starts to give us a sense of physical relief. Okay. And then our brain says, oh, look, we're going to reinforce this connection, this brain connection between the fact that food is an extremely powerful tool for very quickly overcoming these physical sensations of stress. And so your brain sort of like reinforces that link, and you move forward into the next event, the next trigger, whatever that is. And your brain, the next trigger happens, you start negatively processing again, you get that stress hormone release, and then boom, brain goes, I know what will work for this really quickly. Let's go eat X, Y, or Z, get that dopamine release, and then we just keep going round and round and round. Okay. So I wanted to start with understanding the cycle of what's happening, because if you understand this, then you also start to understand this is very much a hormonal game. And if we understand it's a hormonal game, we actually start to open up our toolbox for things that we can do to get the relief, the physical sensations of relief that we actually want and that we're getting with food. And we can actually realize we can actually get these same benefits using a whole other slew of different tools if we give ourselves the chance to do it. Okay. And also, we can start to work on how we process triggers, right? Because if it's the negative processing that causes those stress hormones to dump into our body, then if we actually start to work on how we think about and how we process triggers and stresses and challenges in our life, then we can actually stop ourselves or very quickly take control before we get super down the rabbit hole of feeling super full of anxiety and all those physical sensations really manifesting. Okay. So the goal is to break the cycle and to replace it with something better. And like I said, we can break that cycle by changing how we process. And we can also break that cycle by learning other ways to get hormonal shifts like dopamine and other feel-good hormones going that aren't caloric, right? That aren't going to demolish our progress if we're trying to lose weight and then keep it off and feel fully confident and fully in control. Okay. So before we start talking about the two-pronged strategy that we use, let's first talk about what does not work. And there's a bunch of things that just does not work when you're trying to overcome stress and emotional eating on your own. And a lot of you have probably tried one or many of these things. First of all, willpower alone is not going to work, right? You're not going to just willpower your way through all of this because willpower is a limited resource. And depending on how much stress and how many things are triggering you and how much you have going on in your life, your willpower can run out pretty quickly. especially when you're under stress, right? And so you're not going to just white knuckle your way through this, okay? Second, sometimes people will just say, well, I'm just going to go and remove all of the indulgent foods from my life so that there's just no way I even could emotionally eat, right? And that often backfires too. It leads to us becoming obsessive over food. And then it often backfires and we overcorrect and we rebound, and it can be a really ugly cycle, right? Over restriction never leads to sustainability. So we have to really back away from that strategy altogether. What about beating yourself up? How many of you just say, you know what, I'm just going to shame myself into not emotionally eating? Well, that also doesn't work either. Shame ends up just fueling the cycle. Because what is that? It's negative processing, isn't it? Those negative self-thoughts, negative self-talk, it's just further fueling that fire and that desire to keep stress eating and emotionally eating. So we don't want to do that either. What about trying more food rules? Maybe I'll just put more rules and become more rigid around things. Maybe I won't remove all the favorite foods, but I'll just only allow myself to eat in these exact circumstances, blah, 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 blah. Again, that oftentimes backfires spectacularly because as human beings, we don't love rules. And we tend to find ways to rebel against rules because rules sometimes can be helpful, but oftentimes rules are too restrictive and they're not sustainable. And we're always seeking sustainability, right? So more food rules probably not going to be helpful. What about suppressing your emotions? Let me just pretend that this stressor isn't here. Let me just pretend that I'm not upset. Let me just pretend XYZ, right? Again, the more we suppress our emotions, the more it explodes on the back end because we've got to process. We have to process, and ideally, we want to learn to process the world and process stresses and challenges in a healthy way. But suppression is just like, it's basically like taking a can of pop and screwing the lid on tight, shaking it up and stressing it out. And then all that pressure builds. It's like a tea kettle, right? The pressure has to come out at some point in time. And so we don't want to suppress because then it's just going to explode. All right. Same thing, over restricting after you have a slip up. Like how many of you have ever had a slip up where you emotionally ate, you binge ate, whatever that looked like. And then you feel so guilty and so sort of down on yourself for having done that, that you then followed up the next day and you barely ate anything. So you basically now are getting engaged into this very unhealthy, disordered way of eating where you are binging and then you're overly restricting yourself and then you binge again and then you overly restrict, right? So we don't want to punitively punish ourselves when we do have a slip up because that's going to get this huge pendulum swinging back and forth, and that's not a healthy thing either, right? What about avoiding the real root cause problems, right? How many of you get so focused on, okay, I'm just trying to eat healthier, I'm just trying to not binge eat, I'm just trying to do this, do that, and you're not at all yet acknowledging what are the things that are actually stressing me out? What are the things that are going on in my life and that I actually could potentially be doing some real work around? Maybe I could eliminate certain stressors. Maybe I could make some real changes, some foundational changes in my life, my relationships, whatever, my career, whatever those things might be. Oftentimes we do have the power to change certain things or to make some progress in certain areas of our life. But if we're avoiding addressing those real problems and we're just focusing on the food, then we're not going to get there. We're going to just keep trying to swim upstream, right? Which brings me to the last one, which is I'll just try harder, right? And this is really brings me to a common saying that we use with our clients in our program, which is, look, if nothing changes, then nothing changes. And so if you really want to achieve burnout, keep trying to do the same things that have not been working and just try to push harder doing them. And without a doubt, you will reach a place of burnout, and you'll probably reach a place of burnout very quickly. Okay. But if we actually stop and we start to say, okay, what's not working? Why is it not working? What ways can I learn? What ways can I tweak my approach? What's better strategy, which I'm about to teach you guys, could I employ that would allow me to see real progress and make that progress feel easier so that I can get where I want to be with less effort and avoid burnout? Okay. So these are all the strategies that are simply not going to work. So what does work? All right. And it's a simple two-pronged strategy that we use. Right. On the left side here, the strategy that we take is to really be smart about improving and optimizing and fixing the comfort foods that you're using to achieve comfort when you do stress eat or emotionally eat. So I'm talking about smart food swaps and smart choices that allow you to achieve that dopamine release because the food does taste really good. It is very pleasurable. But because we've done some smart swaps and some smart optimization here, that food is now low calorie, high protein, high fiber, very filling, very indulgent and pleasurable tasting. But now we're able to get that dopamine release with food that is far healthier. And this is a part of the strategy that almost no one else even focuses on, right? And it's kind of like, I think a lot of people jump straight to, well, I should just be eating whole foods and super clean, so I just need to stop eating these foods altogether. And I understand where that comes from, and I think it's I applaud folks who can do that, but I feel like for most people it's not achievable, right? And so a better approach that we like to take is to say, okay, if you're going to really be drawn to or feel like you want to and need to stress eat or emotionally eat, let's at least give you options that taste so good that they give you that dopamine release and they give you that hormone shift to give you relief when you need it. But let's make them foods that will actually get you results instead of sabotaging your progress along the way. So that's the first part of the strategy. And then the second part of the strategy, and we're going to go deeper into both of these, so I'm just high level here, but the second part of the strategy is we've got to start fixing your mind. We have to learn to take control before we turn to food. And then we have to upgrade your beliefs and your ways of thinking. We have to use tools and methods to achieve relief without food altogether. And so combined, both of these strategies together give us some really amazing things. On the left-hand side, when we're actually optimizing and fixing our comfort foods and giving ourselves great options that we can emotionally eat in the short term, now we're able to sort of lessen the negative impact or eliminate potentially the negative impact of emotionally eating altogether, so that now even if we do emotionally eat, oftentimes it's going to not set us back, or it could actually fit into a day of eating where we're actually getting great results while we're emotionally eating if we do it right. So it really buys us the time to now start focusing on doing that deeper, longer term growth so that we don't even have to worry about it in the first place. And that is this two-part strategy. When these two things come together, that's where the magic happens. Okay. So I want to start and go a little bit deeper on this strategy of fixing your comfort foods. Okay. So what do I mean by fixing your comfort foods? When we go to comfort food to stress eat or emotionally eat, like I said before, we're not going to go and break out the grilled chicken breast or the salad or the broccoli or the Brussels sprouts or whatever to emotionally eat, because those foods are not pleasurable and indulgent tasting enough to give us that dopamine hit. So when we turn to foods to emotionally eat or stress eat and to find that dopamine relief that we want, we're turning to foods that are naturally not very good for us. We're turning to real ice cream, pizza, chips and dip, candy, chocolate, sweets, all the stuff that is super processed, super high calorie, super high carb and high fat, very low protein, low fiber, low nutrient content, but it tastes amazing. And that's why it gets us that dopamine hit that we want. Okay. So this strategy is all about being smart and saying, okay, what if I could have ice cream that tastes really, really good? It gets me that dopamine hit. I love sitting down to eat this ice cream, but it is super high protein. It's way lower calorie. And I could actually eat this ice cream as a normal part of my day. And it's not going to negatively impact me at all with my health. In fact, I could actually achieve the weight loss I'm pursuing while eating this ice cream every day. And I can use it as a tool when I need to emotionally eat, but it's not negatively impacting me anymore, right? Or if I'm going to eat pizza, maybe if I had a recipe for making pizza, like this middle picture here, these are some personal pizzas that I make all the time. It's one of the recipes in our cookbook, the Healthy and Whole Cookbook. And I get to eat a whole plate of these little pizzas, and it tastes amazing, but it's perfectly what it should be for getting results, even if I am sitting there eating it because I'm stressed out, right? Or what about those of you who are salty, crunchy lovers? You love your chips and dip. What if I had a healthy dip that I could eat chips and dip with and it just fit into my day? What about your pastry lovers, right? Maybe I find some, I love these legendary protein pastries. A bunch of our clients eat these things all the time. Why? Because it's like a healthy Pop-Tart and it tastes good enough that it gives them that dopamine hit. It gives them that chocolate fix without all the calories and all the carbs and all the fat and all that stuff, right? Same thing. Maybe you like milkshakes. Maybe you love a giant bowl of cereal. Maybe you're a pasta eater or a sandwich eater. There are so many options that if we are smart about what we do, that we can have our cake and we can eat it too. And I know some people kind of say, and they kind of look, but Matt, like, I don't want to be eating all these fake foods. And my argument is, you're already eating fake foods when you stress eat and you emotionally eat. My argument is, you have two options. You can try to white knuckle this and say, I'm not going to eat any of these fake foods. And you're going to be really suffering and white knuckling it and trying really hard while you try to do all the deep work that's going to take a long time mentally and emotionally to get to the point where you don't need these foods for comfort. Or you can start to get smart in the short term and say, okay, if I'm going to eat fake foods, processed foods, things like that, I'm at least going to really upgrade them so they're way healthier, because there are some really good healthy alternatives out there that taste amazing to the point where you won't even know that you're eating a healthy food because it's going to taste like a cheat meal or a cheat food, but it's far healthier, right? And not all of these foods are fake foods, like obviously this cereal is one of my favorite protein cereals, and it's obviously a highly processed food. But that pasta right there is not a highly processed food. It's ground beef, it's chickpea pasta, it's some vegetables thrown in there, it's a chili mac recipe that is mostly whole foods, and it tastes amazing, but it's less than 400 calories for a quarter of that skillet, and it's over 50% protein. So it tastes amazing. It is literally a comfort food with high protein, low calorie. It gives me that dopamine hit, that pleasure hit, but without the consequences. And so that is the first part of the strategy, because when you start to get really smart about upgrading your comfort food choices in the right ways, optimizing for protein, lower calorie, keeping the flavor really high, now we can still get that relief when we need it, but we can do it without the high calorie load while getting lots of protein, removing feelings of restriction, which often backfire. And the nice thing is that foods this high in protein and fiber are often much harder to overeat them because they're so filling. So I often have clients in our program say, Matt, like, we have this French toast recipe that I hear about all the time in the program. And people will say, Matt, I literally cannot eat the full serving of this recipe. I can't eat all 4 slices. It tastes so good and I want to, but I'm so full. And that starts to become really kind of crazy when you start to realize that some of these foods, if you do this right, you literally can't emotionally overeat them to a point that it would be negatively impactful on your progress if you do this right. And so the end result is, before we've done any deeper growth, before we've changed anything about how we think or what we believe or our negative self-talk or how we perceive challenges and process the world, before we've done any of that, we've already made a massive amount of progress just by surface level upgrading the comfort foods when we eat them. And now we're getting progress instead of sabotaging our progress while we work on this issue. And again, I just want to point out, you can continue to focus on eating whole foods and clean eating as much as you want to. I do, right? This is a picture of one of my favorite meals, some baked salmon and some baked veggies, and it's seasoned to perfection. It's one of my favorite meals. I love this meal, but we can also have healthier versions of our comfort foods when we need them. All right. Again, all of this is proof in practice. When we go back to Ashley's journey, it's a perfect example of this. Ashley still has times when she does emotionally eat, but because we've done so much work with her, upgrading her comfort food options, when she emotionally eats, it doesn't have the impact that it used to. And that's why, despite some of these blips on her graph, you see, that's 190 plus pounds that you see lost in that graph. And it's because we started here first. And then we went on and we started really working with Ashley on her mental and her emotional processes and things like that, which is what we're going to get into next. But to round this part out, with enough high protein, low calorie, higher flavor options for comfort foods when you need them, we can oftentimes reduce the impact of emotional eating, sometimes even to zero over time without eliminating emotional eating at all. And that is why that first prong of this strategy is there. Next, we get into focusing on the deep work and fixing our mind. All right. Now, this is the part that is going to take more time because we can very quickly work with you and you can very quickly start to build out a menu of better, healthier comfort food options that give you that dopamine hit without all the damage. But the deep work takes more time because we're literally changing how we think. We're literally changing certain beliefs that we've adopted throughout our lives. And we're literally growing and changing into a more mature person through this process of learning and growth. And I'm going to cover some ways to do that here. So first thing we have to do is we have to understand that we are emotionally driven beings. Almost everything that we do as human beings is not driven by logic. It can be, but almost everything we do is driven by feelings and emotions. We each have our own beliefs and things that we're kind of really focused on or attached to. And we've developed those beliefs and attachments over the course of our lives based on a lot of life experiences. Okay. And so we're going to start with this very simple framework because if you understand this framework, then you will understand how to start taking back control over your feelings and your emotions and your behaviors and your results. So you have to understand that our beliefs, which I just realizing I spelled that wrong, our beliefs, our deeper mental emotional needs and the things that we're kind of attached to, those are the things that drive our thoughts. All right. The things we think about, the thoughts that we have. And you have to understand it's the thoughts that we have that drive our feelings and our emotions, positive or negative. The thoughts we have drive our feelings and our emotions. So if we have inherently positive thoughts and positive beliefs and attachments and things like that, then we're going to have inherently positive feelings more often than not, right? And if we have inherently negative beliefs about ourselves, negative beliefs about other people, about the world, how it works, if we're attached to inherently negative things, then we're going to think inherently negative thoughts more so than positive ones. And those negative thoughts are going to drive more negative emotions and feelings. And depending on whether we're having positive or negative thoughts, driving positive or negative feelings, those feelings will then drive our behaviors, how we make decisions, right? Whether we decide to eat, what we decide to eat, whether we decide to exercise or not exercise, the type of exercise we decide to do, other types of behaviors, every decision in our life is often driven mainly by our feelings and our emotions, more so than logic. And it's our behaviors that drive our results and our outcomes in life. And so if we really break this down, it all starts with our beliefs and our needs and our attachments that we've accumulated throughout our lives with all these different experiences and situations and things that have happened to us, things we've watched happening to other people, movies we've watched, all the stuff. We developed this structure of beliefs and attachments. And that is sort of the spring from which our thoughts come from. And our thoughts drive our feelings and our emotions. And our feelings and our emotions drive a majority of our behaviors and our decision making. And it's our behaviors and our decision making that drives the results that we get in life. So, for example, that is where you'll see with our feelings and our emotions and our behaviors, that is where the stress eating and the emotionally eating comes in. And so if you're someone who, let's just take an example of a negative belief. Sometimes people say, I don't quite understand. I get what you're saying about the thoughts, the way what I'm thinking about can lead to getting me worked up and feeling some negative feelings and emotions and those stress hormones coming out. And then I go stressy and then that causes me to gain weight. I get that, Matt, but I don't really fully understand what you mean about beliefs and attachments. What do you mean by that? Well, a great example of that would be like if you're growing up and let's say that you get made fun of a lot, or your parents, for example, were really focused on physical appearance, right? Your mom or your dad or both were really focused on you had to look exactly a certain way, and they made comments about your weight or your body a lot, or your hair, or this or the other, and they were really attached to looking just perfect and this, that, and the other. Well, then you will sort of develop a belief potentially that your self-worth is very tightly tied to how you look and your physical appearance, right? And so now you'll go through life with a deep attachment to needing to feel like you look a certain way and are perceived a certain way by other people, because you'll basically be afraid if you're not perceived in a certain way that you won't be loved, that you won't be enough, right? That you won't have the value to that person because of your physical appearance. So that's an example of how certain circumstances growing up, especially as children, become beliefs, right? Believing that your self-worth is attached to your physical appearance, becoming attached to physical appearance, things like that can then start to drive all sorts of anxieties and thoughts around, oh my gosh, you're out in public, like, how do I look? Do I look fat? Do these clothes fit right? Do I look professional? Do I look unprofessional? All these things start to swirl. And now we're having social anxiety and it's driving all those things. And we're at the party and we're super uncomfortable. Now we're going to emotionally eat and we're going to binge eat at the party because it's the only thing that can squash those emotions. Okay. So that is how beliefs and attachments and things come up. Okay. And it starts to impact our results, right? So you can see this also becomes this big swirling pattern, right? Because okay, we had some negative thoughts. It got us into feeling some really negative physical sensations and feelings and emotions. That drove us to emotionally eat. That caused us to then, put on more weight or sabotage our progress with weight loss. And now we're down on ourselves. And now that's feeding back into our beliefs about ourselves, right? I'm never going to do this. I never get anything right. I'm not reliable. I can't be consistent. Blah, 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 blah. And it starts this horrible cycle of stress eating and emotional eating, driving negative self-talk, negative thoughts. And it just becomes, we got to break this cycle. All right. We do that by fixing your mind. We do that by starting to take control and do some intentional work around our thoughts and ideally our beliefs, our attachments, right? Because let's take this example I already gave you, right? Maybe you're one of those folks who you grew up and your mom and your dad were super hyper focused on physical appearance. And you developed this belief that your self-worth as a person is directly tied to your weight or to your physical appearance. And because of that, you're super attached to it. Well, that's going to drive very, very specific thoughts very, very consistently, very, very frequently until you change and rework those beliefs, until you replace that belief and those attachments with healthier beliefs and healthier attachments. Okay. Understanding and actually accepting that your self-worth as a human being came from God who created you and was never attached directly to your physical appearance, and that your weight and all that stuff has nothing to do with your value as a person, with your ability to be loved and cared for. That those things were never really truly connected. So if we can start to do some really healthy connections and reconnections and replacing those beliefs and those attachments, then we can also start to drive our thoughts to different places naturally without us even thinking about it, right? But even before we do that, we can just start to be very much more conscious and aware of the things we're thinking about. We can just really redirect our thoughts. And if we can do that, we can start to drive intentionally different feelings and emotions. I'm going to show you guys the tools to do this. So I'm just conceptually getting you to understand what you're going to start doing first. Okay. So we can do that work around our thoughts and our beliefs and our attachments, and that can start to drive new feelings and emotions more predominantly. So we're starting to think more positively. We're replacing negative beliefs with positive ones. We're starting to become more attached to and where we're caring more about good things, positive things, instead of things that are inherently negative. And it's driving more positive thought in general. It's driving better feelings and emotions more consistently. And because of that, we're more in control of our behaviors around food choices and exercising or not exercising, our financial decisions, our relationships, how we communicate, all that stuff improves. And we get better overall results in life. And we just feel better in general. Okay. So that is high level, the cycle that we're trying to create here. All right. And when we do that, it gets really exciting because now we're intentionally eating, we're feeling more in control of our feelings and our emotions and our behaviors and our results. And that feeds back into, man, I feel so much more positive about myself now. And I'm able to develop confidence, and I can talk more positively about myself. I have positive self-talk. I have self-confidence. I have self-belief now. Oh man, it is just such an amazing process. such an amazing turnaround, a transformation, so to speak, right? And hey, this, especially for those of you out there like me who are parents raising little ones, isn't this what you really want to model for your kids? Isn't this what you really want to be sort of the deciding factor for you and your kids as you go throughout life, and that your kids would grow up with this versus this right here? 100%, right? So that's what we're going to do. Now, step one, before we can actually do this, we actually have to take back control in those critical moments, because oftentimes what we do is we sort of, like, a lot of people describe when they emotionally eat that they're going to like on autopilot. Okay. And what they do is they just very quickly react and turn very quickly to something like food to shift their hormones back to a more comfortable place. And what we have to do is we have to take back control before that happens, so that we can make a new choice, so that we can do something else. And what that looks like is I'm going to give you guys a very simple 3-step framework that you can use to sort of conceptualize, okay, how do I do that? How do I stop myself and give myself the opportunity to do something different than emotional eating or stress eating, so that I can get a different result and I can actually learn and grow and start to create real change. All right. And this is a very simple three-step framework. I call it the SIT framework. Step one, the S, is to slow down and take notice, right? Take notice of, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What is the nature of my thoughts? Am I sitting here thinking some really negative thoughts? Am I being really down on myself? Am I having some really junky self-talk right now? But it's just slowing down. You're just putting time in between making any decisions and taking any actions. And you're giving yourself time to respond to what you're feeling, instead of reacting very quickly, trying to grab a food to squash those hormonal shifts that you're feeling. All right. So it's all about slow down, take notice, give yourself time to get to step number 2, which is to intervene with intention. And this is where, because you've stopped, you haven't allowed yourself to just jump right to food. You're paying attention to what you're thinking, what you're feeling, your self-talk, your internal language and narrative, all that stuff. And you're giving yourself time to choose a tool that works for you, not against you. And I'm going to go through all those tools, all sorts of tools, one of which we already covered, right? Didn't I already cover in the first prong of this strategy that if you do some real good work on upgrading your comfort food choices, one tool could be that you do eat, but you eat something that gives you that dopamine release that fits totally with high protein, low calorie, and it actually is working for you instead of against you. Right? So that's one tool, but I'm going to give you guys a ton more tools that you can use on the mental emotional side of this, that you can use during step 2, where you're intervening with intention, not autopilot to food. And then step 3, once we've slowed down, we've used a tool in this moment that works for us, not against us, we want to circle back and we want to start to training ourselves and reflecting back and saying, hey, like, what worked here? And we want to reinforce what's working. Just like if we go back to that cycle of stress eating and emotional eating, the last step in that cycle is that your brain reinforces the connection between the fact that food was such an effective tool for giving you that relief that you needed. Well, now we have to intentionally go through, when we do this cycle and we use other tools to say, okay, oh, you know what? That actually worked really well. When I stopped myself and I went for a walk, maybe it wasn't as quick as smashing my favorite food, but it did work. And maybe now I know that that's something I could easily go do, right? Or you know what? I was feeling really upset and I picked up the phone and I called my spouse, or I jumped on the phone with my son or my daughter, or what, my best friend, and I just talked to them, and that worked too, right? So you're training yourself and you're reflecting back and you're reinforcing your brain connection to what's working, and you're establishing more of a reinforcement and more of a connection between those tools, and you're sort of decoupling it as much from the food as it was before. So very simple 3-step framework, the SIT framework: slow down, give yourself time to respond versus react, intervene with intention, choose a tool that works for you, not against you, even if that tool is healthier alternatives of comfort food, and learn and reinforce what's working in that process. So we kind of talked through this. won't spend too much time because I really just gave a lot of detail there. But really, all you're doing is you're trying to give yourself that time to use a new direction or a new tool. And ideally, what I would tell you is just to when you're in that slow down part of this framework, try to give yourself 15 to 20 minutes, because 15 to 20 minutes is enough time that you can recognize what you're thinking and feeling. You can go through some of the other tools that I'm going to give you next. And you could use another tool, and you can give yourself the relief that you need without the caloric damage of your typical comfort foods. But 15 to 20 minutes is the goal, right? Just make an agreement with yourself. You know what? If you want to go and stress eat, fast food, McDonald's, whatever it is, you can do that, but you got to wait 20 minutes and you got to do some work in that 20 minutes that's going to yield a different result. So when we get to the intervene with intention, I'm going to give you guys 2 slides here that give you a ton of tools that you can use. The first slide here is tools that will literally give you that shifting of a hormone, of that dopamine, bringing in more of those like positive feeling hormones, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, which is the love hormone. These are all hormones that sort of counter the stress hormones. And so this first slide I'm going to go through here is all different things that you can do that will immediately or very quickly trigger new hormone cascades in your body and give you sensations of relief that are not all food. And then the next slide I'm going to go through is more specifically ways to change how you're thinking and how you're processing so that you can also decrease the speed at which you are speeding down the track toward stress hormones and anxiety and all of that stuff. Okay, so on this first slide here, I'm not going to spend too much time on all these, but I'm just going to touch on all of them lightly. So number 1, and this is one of my favorite ones, is deep breathing. And deep breathing is basically just breathing deeply to where you're expanding your belly, not just your chest, and you're really taking a really nice deep breath in, ideally through the nose, and then exhaling through the mouth. And what that does, and the reason I love this so much, because when you do that, there's a nerve that runs from your brain down to your belly called the vagus nerve. And when you do real deep belly expansion breathing, you stimulate that vagus nerve, and it immediately triggers new hormone release. And it gives an immediate, I'm talking within 15 to 20 seconds, immediate feelings of calm and relief. And so that's why I love deep breathing more than almost anything, is because if you just stopped, like right now, let's just stop. If you're watching this, I just hit myself in the face. If you're watching this, I want you to just stop. And if you can, now if you're driving, don't do this. But if you can, just stop for a minute, close your eyes, get into a little bit of a comfortable position. And I want you to do a 3-point breath. The first point is you're going to breathe in, you're going to expand your belly. So push your belly out. Then I want you to breathe in and fill up your chest, and then exhale. So 3-point breath, expand the belly, expand the chest, breathe out. I want you to take 3 more of those breaths. Expand the belly, expand the chest, and exhale. Expand the belly, expand the chest, exhale. All right, we'll stop there. But if you did that with me, I almost guarantee that you felt some sensation of calming, relaxation, of a release of tension in your body. And you can do deep breathing anywhere at any time. If you're in the middle of a meeting, you may not sit there and do that in a meeting, but you can stealthily take a deep breath. You can do that virtually anywhere. When you're driving down the car, anywhere you can do that. Okay. Meditation is another thing that you're using deep breathing when you meditate oftentimes, but you're now directing your thoughts to something. There are a lot of guided meditations that you can listen to, a recording, someone guiding you through a meditation. There's some really great apps that you can use, like Omvana or the Headspace app, a bunch of different apps that you can download for free on the App Store, whether you're on Apple or Android, and they have free recordings of folks who will walk you through a meditation to relax you. And you can find guided meditations that go from anywhere from 2 minutes to 20 minutes or 30 minutes. So you can make them fit in any time frame that you have, right? But meditation, because you're doing that deep breathing, because you're taking control a little bit of your thoughts, it is very helpful in shifting hormones very quickly. Same thing with gratitude. You sit down and you make a gratitude list, for example, right? You're having a crappy day. And so you say, you know what? I recognize I'm having a crappy day. I got an bad attitude right now. grab a piece of paper, grab your phone, whatever it is, you sit down, you write down 10 things that you're deeply grateful for. I guarantee you, by the time you get to 3 or 4, you're already starting to feel better, right? Why? The act of sitting down and doing a gratitude list forced what? Forced you to take control of your thoughts. It forced you to guide your thoughts from a negative space to a positive space. Now it's driving different hormones. Same thing with exercise, right? We exercise, especially higher cardio exercise where we get our heart, anything that gets our heart pumping, we start to get a hormone release, right? Endorphins. Everybody loves endorphins, right? Exercise, amazing way. That's why going for a walk is a great way to shift your hormones because it immediately starts to shift your hormones in a positive direction. You get endorphins just by taking a nice brisk walk. Physical affection, right? How many of you'd be having the worst day, you'd be crying, sobbing in tears, and then just someone walking up to you and giving you a hug and just like kind of embracing you, you immediately feel better. Why? Because when we experience physical touch and physical connection and physical affection, our body releases hormones like oxytocin, known as the love hormone, and that makes us feel good. We love that, right? Could be anything from hugging, kissing, holding hands, sex, all those things will drive a hormonal release, make you feel better. Just positive togetherness, right? Just being in a space with someone who's positive, having a positive conversation, right? Laughing, music, engaging in learning, art, right? Sitting down and doing some crafting, drawing, making something. All of these things force us to focus on something different, and they get our bodies engaged in things that drive immediate hormone shifts. And so all of these, including the last one on the list, which I already covered, which is turning to a optimized, healthier food, comfort food alternative that tastes indulgent. All of these are better ways better tools to employ when you find yourself having slowed down and recognizing that your thoughts and your emotions are headed in the wrong direction. All of these are tools that you can use to shift your hormones somewhat quickly in a way that is not damaging in the same way you were damaging before by stress eating the wrong comfort foods. Okay. Moving on. And this is also a long list, but here is what we're doing. All of the things on this list is really a pretty comprehensive list of the tools that we equip our clients and the tools that I've equipped myself with over the years that I will oftentimes choose from when I recognize that I am in a moment of a critical moment where I need to realign myself, right? Something has triggered me. It is causing me to think a certain way. It is not great. And I need to realign. I need to recalibrate my attitude. I need to recalibrate my thoughts, maybe shift some beliefs. And all of these things are things that I can quickly do and choose from that will help me do that. One of my favorites is prayer and tapping into faith and trust in God. Because as a person of faith, this one definitely tops the list because there's really nothing in this world that as a believer that I believe God does not have a hand in, right? And so if I truly 100% believe that God has his hand in everything in my life, then even when things don't go my way, I can tap into the trust that God has his hand in that thing and that God is working for the greater good. And if I can truly bring myself and remind myself of that in a critical moment, then that's like my cheat code, right? I can just say, you know what? I'm perceiving this as this negative thing, but you know what? What's God doing in this moment? There's something here. And I'm able to really tap into that. And this is one that I use a lot. Another one is just showing yourself you're safe, right? How many times something happens a great example the other day, I was on a call with a client and they said, I heard rumblings that there may be layoffs at our company. And so I'm getting nervous. I'm kind of a little bit worried about my future in this company. And they're starting to play out all these scenarios and they're getting anxiety and they're tensing up and they're like really fixating on it. And I just said like, hey, how can you just show yourself that you're going to be okay, that you're safe right now in this moment? And just asking that question, they were like, okay, well, you know what? Like we've got money saved up in the bank. I've got all these skills. Like even if I did lose my job, like, you know, I have years of experience, I have a great resume. I can go out and find another job. I actually can think of 2 or 3, friends I have in other companies that I could reach out to, maybe it might even be nice to have a little bit of time off, like their brain starts working And they're like, you know what? Yes, this isn't ideal, but I'm safe. I'm good. Like I'm okay. And so you can oftentimes just stop and just show yourself that you are safe, that you are okay. And that can bring you back to a more stable place to move forward. What about separating truth from opinion or fear? Like how many of you oftentimes when something triggers you or you hear about something or some kind of a scenario, your brain just like a runaway train just goes and it starts making all these assumptions and or you develop these opinions about certain situations or about other people. You would make assumptions about what other people might be thinking or why they may have said or done something. And in reality, all of these things are just assumptions. They're not necessarily truth. And so oftentimes if we just stop and slow down, right? First step in the sit framework, and we just said, okay, what is actually true here? What is actually fact? And what are assumptions that are driving me batty right now? And let me just squash all of that and just say, this is what I know to be true. Everything else, I don't know that for a fact. And I'm not going to get emotional about it because I don't know that to be a fact. So sometimes just separating what is true and fact from what is opinion or assumption or fear is enough to kind of bring us back, right? What about separating what you control from what you do not? Just stopping and saying, okay, I'm gonna slow down. The situation is not ideal, but you know what? I don't have a factor here that I control in this particular situation. So I'm going to let go of that control. I'm going to let go of that feeling or that need to control. And I'm going to focus on what I do control, right? Let's go back to that example a minute ago where I gave where the client reached out and she said, I'm hearing rumblings of potential layoffs. Well, she can't control whether she's going to get laid off or not, but she can control if she starts pre-planning right now. She says, okay, well, just in case I were to get laid off, who would I contact? What places might I want to go? How might I change my spending habits right now just to kind of put myself in a more stable position? What moves might I make right now that would make me feel like, you know what, even if I do get laid off, I'm going to be okay. She's shifting from what she cannot control, which is the idea that she might get laid off, and she's shifting it to what she can control, which is planning for the worst case scenario and putting herself in a great position, even if that did happen, right? What about finding gratitude? We covered that in the last slide, but it goes beyond just sitting down and saying, okay, this is, I'm feeling triggered by this moment. I'm going to make a gratitude list and write down 10 things I'm grateful for. What if you actually just sat down and said, okay, how can I find gratitude in this situation that is not ideal right now? Again, we go back to the same example we were just using around the client who's heard about rumblings of layovers, right? How can we find gratitude in that situation, right? Well, I can find gratitude around the fact that if I lose my job, I still have had years of experience and I've learned so much in my time with this company, and I've made great friends and I've made great connections, and I'm now a more skilled, more wise, more experienced person than I was before. And even if I lose my job, that's also amazing. And I'm so thankful and grateful for that, right? Finding gratitude in that negative situation did what? It reframed it from something that is all negative, all the sky is falling bad. And now all of a sudden, we're reworking that. We're shifting that energy into something much, much more positive. Finding compassion, right? How many of you have entered into conflict with someone, whether it's a spouse or a coworker or something like that, and or someone acted in a way that you didn't love, and that you maybe it made you sick, it disgusted you, right? Whatever it may have been, you didn't agree with it, right? But you shift yourself out of judgment, right? And you shift yourself into trying to find compassion. Someone wrongs you and you start saying, you know what, I wonder what drove them to speak in that way. I wonder what hurt and what pain that they are feeling. I wonder what trauma that, what traumatic events and things happened to them, maybe when they were growing up, that made them like this. And you start to see this person not as an aggressor, but as someone who themselves has experienced pain and is probably experiencing pain. And you find love and compassion for that person, and it changes how you see them, and it changes how you interact with them, and it changes how you maybe you don't take things as personally, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So finding compassion for someone or for an event or for a thing can totally change how you are thinking and feeling and speaking about that thing. What about opening yourself to new possibilities, right? Go right back to this example we've been jamming on. You find out you hear rumblings about layoffs at your company. You're worried about your job, but then you start to say, you know what? Like, okay, what could be possible now? Maybe I start my own business, right? Or maybe I've always thought about, maybe I've been thinking about making a career change anyway, right? Maybe I was kind of, if I'm being honest, I was kind of like feeling like my growth trajectory in this company was kind of, fizzling out anyway. And like, what if I went to a new company? What new possibilities would that open up? Right. Maybe I could find something where I work from home and I could spend more time with the kids. Maybe I could find something where I travel more and I could get to see more places and be around people more. Now we're shifting from seeing nothing but the negatives and we're getting excited about the possibilities, right? That's a great option. What about finding humor? This is one that my wife and I, Joni, we use all the time. We have two kids. We have our 2-year-old Corbin, we have our 7-year-old Lachlan, and we have two dogs, a boxer, and a Cavapoo, and then we have a cat. And there are moments in our house where it's just chaos. It's just chaos. Both kids are going crazy, playing together, or maybe they're all crying at the same time. The dogs are running around chasing each other. The cat, it's just absolute chaos. And oftentimes Joni and I will just look at each other. We'll make a joke. Why? Because the situation is the situation. We signed ourselves up. We love our family, right? And so we can either be mad and overstimulated, or we can sit here and make a funny joke about the situation that we're in. And immediately we laugh and immediately we start to feel better. The situation hasn't changed. The kids are still crying. The animals are still being crazy, right? But we just changed our perspective in that moment. We kind of found some humor and a little bit of gratitude in that moment. And it changed how we experience that moment, right? What about practicing acceptance, right? Oftentimes, a lot of the inner turmoil that we experience is simply because we have not allowed ourselves to simply accept the reality that life or God has presented to us. And we're fighting that. And if we would just practice acceptance of that thing, we could then stop all that inner turmoil and we could actually just move on, right? It's kind of that idea of we stop wishing things were different than they are and we start accepting them as they are so that we can move forward, right? That can be a new beginning for us. What about don't take it personally, right? This one, if you want a great book to read, there's actually 2 great books that I would recommend people read when it comes specifically to not taking everything personally in life. And that is The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. That book alone completely changed my life. And the Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. 2 great books that kind of teach the same theory, but in different ways, and combined, they're both, especially you read both of those books, it's life-changing. I would say read Let Them Theory first, because it's a little bit lighter reading, and then read The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And that's probably the best order to read those 2 in. But those 2 books essentially really teach you not to take everything personally. They kind of help you realize that, you know what, like if you're like, we go back to the example I was giving earlier about how sometimes growing up, I've had clients who were in a house where their parents were hypercritical about physical appearance and super hyper focused on weight and physical appearance. And that caused the child to grow up being hyper attached to their physical appearance and feeling and believing like their self-worth and their ability to be loved is directly tied to their weight and their physical appearance. And they're obsessed with it their whole life, right? Well, when we learn not to take this person, that can cause a lot of resentment, towards your parents and things like that, right? And that can affect your relationship with them, right? Well, what if you just realize that your parents didn't do that intentionally? Maybe their parents or their grandparents were that way, right? So oftentimes when people do things to us or say things to us that is mean, right? I think about a time that Joni and I went through the grocery store checkout line, and the person who was checking out our groceries was very short. She didn't say hi. She didn't say, how are you doing? She didn't say, thank you for coming. She just was, just silent and kind of just very short. And you could tell she was not in the best of moods. And as we left, Joni, who herself in that moment was kind of in a little bit of a mood, said, man, what is it with people these days? You just can't get good help. Like nobody has any manners anymore. People don't say hi. They don't say, thank you for coming. How you doing? Thank you for shopping today. It's just scan it all. And I just, in that moment, because I've learned these lessons, I said, hey, like, don't take it personally. I said, we don't know what's going on in that girl's heart and mind. She could have lost someone today. She could have just gotten out of a long relationship, right? She could be waiting on test results to find out if she's got cancer. So much could be going on in her heart and her mind and in her life right now. And the reason she was rude or not super hospitable could be because of all those things. And it's actually not about us, and it's not about the fact that the world is going to hell. It's actually just because of what's going on in her heart and her mind and her life today. Right? So don't take it personally, and don't make small things turn into big things, making those assumptions, right? What about finding the lesson, right? This one is one that I have used so often. I call it paying the tuition in the school of life, right? I've made some big mistakes in my life, and I've paid some big consequences for those mistakes. One I think about in the last 3 years, I made a huge investment into a coach who was going to help me with some things. And it ended up being kind of a bust, right? I invested close to $50,000 in a coach to help me with some things. And I just wasn't pleased with the experience of that. And the outcome wasn't what I was sold and what I thought it was going to be. And initially I felt led to kind of beat myself up, come on, Matt, like you just like wasted $50,000 of your family's money. Like, you're raising kids, you're taking care of a family, and here you just made a really bad decision. And so I needed to reframe that. And so what I did is I said, okay, if we treat this experience as a learning experience, and we treat the pain of losing that money as the tuition of the school of life, what lessons could I learn in this? And I said, okay, well, I could learn that next time I hire someone that's going to charge a lot of money, I could take more time in the interview process. I could ask better questions. I could trust my gut a little bit more. I could do more due diligence, ask for references, right? So I learned from that experience. And because I learned from that experience, I'm not still beating myself up for that mistake that I made 3 years ago, right? And I know that's something that a lot of people struggle with. How many of you are still beating yourself up today for a mistake that you made last week, last year, or last decade, right? And it could just be because you haven't gone back and said, you know what happened? Let me extract learning and lessons. Let me pay my tuition to the school of life and move on. What about finding humility, right? Letting go of your ego, right? I think about people who, someone got passed over for a promotion at work, right? This, that, or the other. Or you expected to be complimented in a certain way. You expected this, you expected that, and it didn't happen the way you wanted it to, right? And your ego is causing some noise, right? Finding humility, right? Bringing yourself back down a little bit, can quiet and soften all that turmoil in your heart and in your mind. What if you're just feeling overwhelmed? Breaking big, overwhelming things down into smaller steps is a great way to squash those feelings of overwhelm. Reframing negative things or negative perceptions into positive perceptions, which actually is something you've seen me do a lot through all of these examples, but I just wanted to call it out directly and very specifically, right? A great example of this, and again, guys, I'm going to take time on this training because I think that a lot of people learn well through storytelling, and I'd rather take the time to do this properly than to speed through a training and not give you the value that you want. Okay. So I'm going to tell a quick story here. I went to a conference about 3 or 4 weeks ago. My business coach was putting this conference on, and he was up on stage talking, and he walked us through this money exercise. And he was trying to teach us, some things about our relationship with money and all that stuff. And anyway, he gave us 2 pieces of paper, and he had us write down on one piece of paper the amount of money that we would be totally good pulling out of our bank account right now and paying to anybody else in the room as a gift. And it wouldn't make us uncomfortable at all. And he had us write that amount down on the paper and then put our name on it. And then he had us on the second piece of paper write down an amount that we would pull out of our bank account, gift to anybody in the room, and it would make us feel really uncomfortable. He has us write that number down on the paper, write our name on it, fold them up, and then he had everybody in the room who had done this stand up, and music starts playing, and we're all walking around, and every couple of seconds he'd have us stop and exchange papers with the person in front of us. And long story short, we go through this whole exercise, and all of us in the room are kind of like a little bit uncomfortable because we feel like we're giving this money away as we're handing it to people, even though we haven't exchanged any money yet. It's a little uncomfortable. And that's the whole point of the exercise. Well, then we get to the end, and my coach says what I think most of us were dreading. He says, okay, we've done the exercise. And he says, I'm not going to track all you down and hold you accountable to doing this. But my encouragement to you is that whoever's pieces of paper you ended up with, my encouragement is I want you to go to those people and I want you to request that money. I want you to ask them to pay you that money. And when those people come to you, I want you to pay them whatever amounts you wrote down on those pieces of paper. And I think most people in the room, got really uncomfortable. I know I did. And most people in the room, 99.9% of them said, I get the point, Mike. I don't need to go do that. I'm not going to go ask for money. And 99.9% of the people in the room didn't follow through with that part of it. I didn't follow through with that part of it. I didn't go ask anybody for money. I had 2 pieces of paper in my hand. Both of them said $20. And I was like, I'm not going to go ask someone for $20. I'm good, right? My bank account is fine. I don't need to take $20 from someone. But as we were all eating lunch, just about 20 minutes later, a girl who was at the conference walks up to me as I'm talking to a whole group of people, holds up a piece of paper that says, Matt Portwood, $2,500. And she says, this is really uncomfortable, but would you fulfill this? And my heart just like sank in that moment. And my whole body, I mean, you want to talk about a stress hormone dump, fastest stress hormone dump I think I've ever experienced in that moment. I mean, I wanted to throw up, and I'm surrounded by these people, everybody's watching. But I had already told myself ahead of time. I said, if someone comes up to me and asks me for this money, I'm a good player. So I'm going to say yes, and I'll deal with whatever I need to deal with on the other end. And so I did. I said yes. I said yes, but I said, I can't give away this money without calling my wife first and doing her the honor as my wife of letting her know why I'm taking $2,500 out of our bank account and giving it to a complete stranger. So I said, give me a few hours. She's at work. I'm going to call her, let her know what's going on, and then we'll circle back later and I'll pay you the money. Let me tell you something. For the next 3 to 5 hours, I was in knots. I was tense. I was mad. I was not processing in a healthy way. Let me just say that. I was mad at Mike, my business coach. I was thinking, I was like, what the heck, Mike? Like you couldn't tell us this beforehand that we were going to give away this money. I already spent thousands of dollars to come to this conference, and here I'm going to leave thousands of dollars, in the hole, because I came here to learn how to make more money, not to give all my money away. I had a really bad attitude about it. And I was mad at her. I had all these thoughts going through my heart and my mind, like, oh my gosh, I would never ask for money like this. Like who is she to come up and have the balls to come up in front of all these people and ask for $2,500? I would never do that. I had some really bad thoughts, really bad processing going through my heart and my mind. But I teach this stuff for a living. So what did I do? I did what I know to do. I actually prayed, and I tapped into my faith and my trust in God. And I used several other things on this list as well. But I said, okay, you're a person of faith, Matt, and you believe as a person of faith that God has his hand in everything in your life. And if you truly believe that, then you believe that you getting on a plane, flying to this conference, sitting in this room, your coach getting up on stage, doing this exact exercise, you writing those exact amounts on that piece of paper and putting your name on it, and that piece of paper ending up in that girl's hand, and then that girl having the confidence to come up to you and awkwardly in front of a bunch of people ask you for that money. God's hand was in every step of that. And if God's hand was in every step of that, then there's a reason for it. And I said, okay, this is a moment for me to be obedient to God. I said, if she had the confidence, the balls to come up to me and ask me for that money, she must really need it. She must really be struggling. And so I said, this is not a punishment. And I did that reframing. I turned what was a negative perception into a positive. I said, I have prayed to God to bless this business so that I could bless others. And God is giving me what I prayed for, because God put that money in my bank account and it's there. And I can give it to this girl and make it a blessing to her. And I can be obedient to God in this moment. This can be a blessing to everybody right now. And it can be a blessing on me and my relationship with money and my attachment to money. It can be a blessing to her. And I get to be obedient in this moment. And so that was a very long story, I understand, but I wanted to give you a very real example of a way that I used reframing a negative perception into a positive perception, because I had a very negative perception of that whole situation. And because of that negative perception, I was feeling horribly. And I was definitely in a place where if I wasn't at a conference, surrounded by healthier food and health coaches and stuff like that, I probably would have really emotionally ate in that moment, but I was able to lean onto these tools. And by the time I finished, but by the time I got to where I was ready to pay her that money, I was excited to pay her that money. I was excited to bless her with that and to be blessed by the opportunity to give her that money. So I just wanted to give a long story, but a good example of doing this in practice. And then last tool or mental frame here is just to actually get outside of yourself and actually seek help and direction and support, and maybe talk it out with someone else. Get someone else's perspective. And I recommend make sure, if you can, really be careful who you turn to for that help and that direction and that support. Make sure that you have mentors or coaches in your life, or really positive people in your life who are going to give you good perspective, right? Don't turn to people who are going to just like jump in the mud pit with you, right? Like it would not have been helpful in that scenario I just gave you guys if I would have just, ended up next to someone talking and be like, and then they're going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she asked for that money. What the heck is wrong with her? Like, that's not the person that I want to get that that from. Instead, I want to connect someone who's going to be like, you know what, like, this is a God thing, Matt. And like, let's think about how this is actually be a good thing. You want to connect with someone who's going to help you give a positive perspective shift there for you. But all of these very quick mental shifts and reframes that you can put into your toolkit, and you're not going to use them all at the same time, but depending on the situation, you're going to have certain ones here that you will use more often. They'll become your go-tos, and you'll be able to use all of them when you need them in a critical moment. Okay. And then the last step in the 3-step framework, we talked about slowing down. We just went through 2 slides full of tools and things that you can do in the moment to intervene with intention. And lastly, we want to make sure that we're training ourselves for the future. Okay. And we're asking ourselves, right, what can I learn from this moment? What worked well here? What didn't work well here? What would you want to remember for the future? What would you want to repeat in the future? What would you not want to repeat? What would you want to change? What are you proud of? Like, what's one positive thing that you could be proud of yourself or learn from yourself about, even if you didn't execute perfectly? It's all about going back and intentionally pulling positivity and intentionally pulling gratitude out of those moments. And the goal here is to be intentional with your learnings. Okay, I mentioned before that we all go throughout life processing our life, processing the things that are happening. And out of the way we process those things, we develop beliefs about ourselves and beliefs about other people and beliefs about the world. And we develop attachments based upon that. And the reason, most of the time when we're developing these beliefs, we're not doing it intentionally. Most people are not, right? Like when you were a child and your parents did something that traumatized you a little bit, and all parents traumatize their kids to some extent. But you as a child didn't sit there and go, okay, they just did that thing. I'm now going to make this belief about this thing out of this thing. You didn't sit there as a child and consciously do that, right? And most humans don't consciously do that. So the whole point of stopping and sort of training yourself and reflecting after moments like this happen is so that you can be intentional about the beliefs and the learnings that you're integrating from situations. Like when I sort of sat back and retrained myself and I asked myself, what would I take away from this whole experience with my business coach and paying this money and all of that stuff? And I said to myself, okay, prayer and really tapping into my faith really worked. I went for a walk that helped calm me down in the moment. There was a guy there who was a pastor, so I talked to him for 5 or 10 minutes, and that really helped. I called my wife and we had a nice talk, and we got to really kind of connect and get on the same plan. There were a lot of things that I did there that really helped. I know that. And I'm also sitting there saying to myself, okay, now I have a better relationship with myself, better relationship with God, and I was able to be a blessing. I integrated all those things and I learned some really good things in those moments. And I was proud of myself for doing what I did in that moment, right? But if I don't stop and really take the time to kind of reflect, then I could just learn the wrong things. And that's what a lot of people do. So as we're wrapping up here, we're almost to the end, guys, I promise. 3 tips to overcome stress eating faster. If you want to do this faster in your life, here's 3 things you can do to do that. Number 1, this was totally life-changing for me, is make learning and growth a daily focus and a daily habit in your life. So you want to turn mindless time, if you can, into growth time. So think like audiobooks, reading a physical book, listening to a positive podcast, positive YouTube videos like this one, instead of cable news, TikTok, social doom scrolling on Facebook or Instagram, things like that that are not feeding you, or that are feeding you, but they're feeding you the wrong things. It's all about shifting away from things like cable news, TikTok, etc., to things that are inherently positive, teaching you, expanding your perspectives, your knowledge, your skills, growing you as a person. Okay. And the ideal here is that you're really going to start taking any time in your day that you would consider mindless time and filling it with growth. So like, think about it, like when you're getting ready in the morning, right? You're in the shower, you're doing your hair, your teeth, your makeup, whatever that is. You're cooking, you're driving, you're cleaning the house, you're doing laundry and folding laundry. Anything that you're doing where your brain can multitask is a perfect opportunity to pull up an audiobook, pull up a podcast, a YouTube video, have something playing in the background so that you're not just mind wandering into the wrong places, or just sitting down and getting lost in a TikTok feed or an Instagram or a Reels feed somewhere, doom scrolling on Facebook, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, watching the toxic cable news channel for hours, getting worked up about all the politics in the world and all the stuff that's wrong with the world. Fill that time with daily learning and growth. This one thing is what expedited my ability to overcome stress and emotional eating, because I disengaged from a lot of the toxic forms of things that you can consume in media. And I probably read 30 to 40 books via audiobook in my first year of doing this. And that's a lot of learning and a lot of growth. And that completely changed my life, because it changed how I thought. It was like having 40 different coaches that I was learning from, 40 different mentors that I was learning from. And it all just happened because I took useless time and I filled it with good, wholesome things. The second is I just really encourage you to don't try to do this all on your own. Get coaching and get help with this. Whether it's with us at Healthy and Whole or not is irrelevant, right? I did not get here on my own. I got here with my own coaches and mentors that I still have to this day, right? And you're probably not going to get where you want to be on your own either. So get coaching and get help. Being alone in your own heart and your own mind with only your limited perspective, your limited wisdom, and your limited experiences is a dangerous place to be, right? And a good coach or mentor can really help you to learn the tools that I've introduced you guys to here and to practice them faster. And a good coach can help you to extract learning and lessons in ways that you might not otherwise be able to do on your own. They can help you shift your perspectives and get practice shifting your perspectives and things like that. But if you're just out there just watching this video and just going to go out and try to do this on your own, it's going to be, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's going to be difficult to do. And so I really recommend to get coaching and to get help. And as an extension of that, I really recommend that you find an empowering community to engage with. There's a popular saying that says that we are the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time around in life. Okay. And so surrounding yourself with other people who are on a growth-minded, positively focused, highly motivated track, right? A community that aligns with those things, that's going to elevate you and empower you. But if you are surrounding yourself predominantly, whether it's in person or via text or just other ways, with people who are very negatively focused, they are negatively processing everything in the world. They're full of negative beliefs and limiting beliefs and negative attachments. It's going to be very hard for you to pull away from that, to elevate yourself up above that, because that's all going to be like gravitationally pulling you back down. Okay. So you want to find a community, a tribe, so to speak, of people who are seeking to learn, seeking to grow, seeking to achieve, seeking to be better mentally, emotionally, and otherwise as people. And also, that community doesn't just give you a place to go to be elevated because of the people you're around, but it also gives you a place to serve and to encourage others, which is also incredibly important as a part of your mental, emotional journey. To be able to show up for other people as they are showing up for you is also a critical part of your learning and your growth as well. So just to summarize, as we wrap up here, we've talked about understanding the hormonal basics of stress and emotional eating, right? That we get triggered, we have negative ways of processing and thinking about things. It drives stress hormone release, makes us feel all sorts of uncomfortable. We turn to food, food drops out the dopamine, makes us feel relief, and then we do it all again, right? And we talked about the two-prong strategy where we start with optimizing our comfort foods so we have better comfort food options that can work for us and actually achieve our goals if we do it right, not against us. And then we got into fixing our mind, starting with the SIT framework, where we allow time and space for change and growth to happen by slowing down, intervening with intention, using all the tools that I just introduced you guys to, and then reflecting on that every time and training ourselves for the future, finding new tools that shift our hormones and provide relief, building our mental toolbox of ways to shift our thinking and to think in new ways and practicing those, making daily growth a habit, getting a coach and getting help, and finding a community or a tribe that can support you on this journey. And then lastly, I will just say, be patient and give yourself grace, because when you leave this training, if you really want change in your life in this area, you're going to have to take action and you're going to have to do some uncomfortable things. And it's like I said before, if nothing changes, then nothing changes. But just changing one thing can often change everything. And if you just leave this training with a commitment that you're going to start down this path of learning and growth, and you actually start down that path, then you will get where you want to be. But just like if we go back to Ashley's graph way up here in this presentation, you will see that this did not happen overnight, right? This happened over a long period of time, weeks and months, right? She's coming up on 2 years here soon in this journey. And so be patient, okay? I'm going back through all these slides here. Be patient and give yourself grace and give yourself permission to embark on this journey, get the help that you need, and be patient as you go through this process, because it is a process. And it's much like climbing a mountain. You know, you have to start by putting one foot in front of the other. Surround yourself with people that can climb that mountain with you. Get coaches and guides who know how to do it. And I promise you that you will get where you want to be. If you do want help doing this and you want to align yourself with Healthy and Whole and have us walk you through this process, then there will be links down beneath in the description of this video to an application page, and you can reach out to us and inquire, and then we'll reach out to you and we'll just start an exploratory conversation. You won't be asked to make any decisions. It'll just be an exploratory conversation where we explore if it's the right time for us to work together and if it would be a good fit for us to work together. And if it is, then we'll absolutely move forward and be super excited to start this journey just like we did with Ashley. But if it's not a good fit, then we will refer you out to someone who we think would be a good fit for you. And at least then it's still a win-win for you. So feel free to reach out if you do want help. And I hope that this training has opened some doors for you. I hope it's been a blessing for you. And I'm excited to do more trainings like this in the future. Till then, be blessed. And I'll see you next time.